I will now welcome Markus Schulte, who's a principal advisor at DG ECFIN, to deliver a keynote speech, which will link the EU budget more specifically, in fact, Invest EU and the Green Deal, and how the Commission is thinking about aligning public finance and private finance to the Green Deal. And please, again, ask your questions in the Q&A section. I see that there's already some interaction there. Markus will take a few questions after his speech. So Markus, the floor is yours. I think you have a few slides. You want to share your screen then if you want to show them. Thank you.
So I will take you through a couple of slides linking what we call the European Green Deal Investment Plan and the Recovery Plan for Europe. I only was able to join a couple of minutes ago, but I heard what Sandrine was saying towards the end of her speech, and indeed this is one of the challenges. You will probably recall that the EU Commission, we put forward a communication on the 14th of January this year, where we set out the European Green Deal Investment Plan, i.e. the financing that we see as necessary and that we would want to mobilize in order to support the very broad objectives of the Green Deal, which range, of course, from increasing the EU's climate ambition via clean, affordable, secure energy, mobilizing industry for a clean and circular economy, energy and resource efficiency, zero pollution, preserving and restoring ecosystems, farm to fork, biodiversity. All these elements come together under the Green Deal, and we have been looking into how that could be financed through the next MFF. Now, obviously, I'm not sure how good actually here we are. The Green Deal Investment Plan reflects the ambition, obviously, of the Green Deal to make Europe the first climate neutral continent, to reflect the biodiversity, air pollution objectives as well, and also to take account of what we call a just transition for all, in recognition that obviously for some regions and sectors in the European Union, the challenge to master that transition will be much greater. And here, obviously, the EU budget can be of help in cushioning the impacts or facilitating the transition. Actors are member states, regions, but also companies and investors. In view of the considerable amount of investments needed, it's also clear that not all of these can come from public budgets. So we have proposed an overview where we showed in January where the 1 trillion euros that President von der Leyen had announced would come from. And all of that in a framework where we look at the funding first, but then also at enabling framework to make sure that this funding reaches all the actors at all levels. And then we also need to look at the execution, which means the funding will only be relevant when it is translated into concrete and credible projects that are in line with the objectives of the Green Deal. Now, this is the graph that we had in our communication in January, where we bring together the 1 trillion. And obviously the EU budget is a major element in this. Then the Invest EU guarantee, where we leverage the EU budget, and with the help of the EIB and other implementing partners, mobilize very significant investments. Now, as I said, obviously this is the state of play of January before the COVID-19 crisis. And now we have moved into a different environment. I'll just say a few words on these elements: enabling, funding, enabling, and executing. Now, but I see, unfortunately, my graph doesn't show very well. I have to do this from my iPad, and apparently the graph is truncated. Unfortunately, my PC didn't let me use Zoom. So in this truncated graph, I'll just tell you an enabling framework for the policies underlying the European Green Deal has to bring in a lot of components. And one key component is the European semester, obviously, where the Commission, together with member states, coordinates national economic policies. But obviously, the national reform programs also need to be aligned with the national climate and energy plans. Then there is one component, green public procurement. I will not say much on that, just to mention it, which is also part of this framework, and work is going on that. There are also state aid rules that are important. There is work ongoing on screening and benchmarking green budget practices. So green budgeting is also another important element in this. All of this together, including, for example, also the EU taxonomy, should help create a framework of conditions that help incentivize public and private financing through a tailor-made regulatory and policy framework. To complete the picture, in terms of executing this investment plan, a number of things need to come together. And now what's written in here is still valid. It mentions the reform support program. Something similar is also there under the new recovery proposal. So there will be support to public administrations when identifying and planning relevant investment projects. There will be the InvestEU Advisory Hub, which will support project promoters. And there will be the InvestEU portal, which builds a bridge between investors and project promoters and makes relevant projects highly visible, so that they can be on the radar screen of investors, including institutional investors, which will play a very important role. Now here, this graph also is unfortunately truncated. What I should say, we have been working on the sustainable finance strategy that will come out in the third quarter of this year. As you know, the renewed sustainable finance strategy. The sustainability dimension is already, since this year, part of the country reports that the Commission is producing in the context of the European semester. And now one element, the work on the next MFF has obviously now been done in a way very different from what was expected. So in January, we were on a somewhat different trajectory. Now, on the recovery plan for Europe, just as a very brief economic backdrop, you're all aware that we are facing a major recession this year, and that the analysis of investment needs is such that the COVID has, of course, led to a decline in public but mainly private investment, and this could have a serious impact. So a large number of actions have been taken in order to counter that, and I'm only recalling here that before the recovery package that was put forward by the Commission last week, Wednesday, on the 27th of May, there was already sure unemployment reinsurance. There was the agreement on an ESM, pandemic crisis support, and there is the guarantee fund, the Pan-European Guarantee Fund that has been launched at the initiative of the European Investment Bank, that brings together 540 billion euros. And then the means mobilized under the Next Generation EU, the European Recovery Instrument, as it is formally called, that brings a temporary reinforcement of means at the EU level of 750 billion. And the multi-annual financial framework is at an order of magnitude of 1.1 trillion euros. So these are massive amounts, although of course the MFF is over a period of 7 years, whereas Next Generation Europe is clearly there to be front-loaded in the first years of that period. What is now happening? Now, this is of course a proposal or a set of proposals by the Commission. But one thing that President von der Leyen has made clear already on the 100th day of her being in office as Commission President was that while with the COVID-19 pandemic, the immediacy of certain problems has of course shifted, that would not affect the long-term prioritization of the European Union as regards the European Green Deal and as regards other long-term objectives such as the strategy for Europe's digital future. So this slide here shows broadly the key strands of how the EU budget is powering the recovery. And you see a solvency support instrument in the middle, a strategic investment facility under InvestEU, and a strengthened InvestEU program. I single this out in part because those are the work streams on which I personally work with my colleagues. And one of the issues here is that in all these proposals by the Commission, while, for example, the solvency support instrument has a very clear economic rationale, which is to provide capital equity support to companies that are viable, but because of COVID-19 have come under strain and face solvency issues. This proposal has references to the European Green Deal, for example. So does the InvestEU program, which already had that, but we have now proposed this. We have now proposed to increase the InvestEU program. And as part of the InvestEU program, we have also increased the climate target under the sustainable investment window in the Commission proposal from to 60%. And that is significant because we have also doubled the volume of the guarantee that we propose to provide to this window on sustainable infrastructure. So I can't take you through all the details, but this is a detail I think that is significant and that is perhaps emblematic for the fact that the recovery instruments that we are proposing certainly hold on to the priorities of the European Green Deal. Now, here are some considerations on the expected impact of the recovery plan on the Green Deal investment plan. To be honest, the package that we put forward last week is very big. Not only very big, it's also complex. And when we presented in January that graph on the 1 trillion, we did a lot of very careful work to make sure that presenting such a number is sound, that there are no overlaps. So we will have to look at this still carefully, how that graph would look like in the future. But for example, whereas we targeted an overall investment to be mobilized from InvestEU of 650 billion under the earlier proposal. Our new proposal for InvestEU envisages investment to be mobilized of 1 trillion. And as you know, the climate target alone under InvestEU is set at 30%. And as I mentioned, we increased the sustainable infrastructure window and also increased the climate target there. So I think in sum, what I can say is also as part of the lessons learned from the previous crisis, it is important in the recovery, also with a clear economic logic of shoring up companies, of shoring up demand, of shoring up investment, in that logic at the very same time to make sure that this investment is concentrated on the long-term priorities of the European Union. And a key priority of the European Union and certainly of the European Commission is the European Green Deal. So I think on that basis, you can see that there hasn't been any negative impact on that objective, rather the opposite. I think that what was mentioned before, that there are obvious risks also in that regard, but as far as the Commission proposal goes, I think the long-term objectives of the Union with regard to the Green Deal stand and are well supported by our proposals. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Markus. If you can bear with us a few minutes, so we'll take 1 or 2 questions. Is that okay with you?
Yes, that should work. It won't be. I won't be available very long. Let me just see.
We are running out of time anyway, so it's just okay. A few minutes. Sandrine Dixon wants to ask a question, so I'll give her the floor in a second. I want to sum up a few questions I saw on the Q&A in one way. I think you highlighted a lot of complexity on the one hand to the EU's proposal, which for the moment is also an EU Commission proposal, which will be discussed in the coming weeks with member states and also with the Parliament. There's one question which says, how much should we hope that the EU is equipped to accompany a transformation of the economy right now and using this recovery plan, or how much are we too much embedded within business as usual? I know it's a bit of a provocative question, but so I guess to you the point is, what do you see as the key success factor of really using the next few weeks and months to shift the EU's economy to sustainability instead of bailing out the incumbents, if I may put it this brutally? So if you can respond to that, and then Sandrine ask your question.
Maybe Benoit, I'll just add to that because it goes very much in a similar light. So Markus, thank you very much for that complete presentation, even though some of your diagrams didn't come out perfectly well, but we will distribute, if that's okay with you, the
sure,
full presentation.
I'll send you, yeah.
That would be really great. I want to build exactly on Benoit's point, which is, one is that the European semester and also obviously most of our economic functioning still has indicators which are relative to growth. And so if we are going to truly shift our investment plans, it is obviously the member states, when they actually look at the shovel-ready projects, that need to really shift in the direction that Benoit has just indicated. I've had conversations with von der Leyen's cabinet and others. I guess my question to you would be, what are the criteria, the evaluation criteria, the monitoring criteria that we're going to put in place to ensure that actually once the investment, once the money goes out, it does effectively go to where it needs to go to continue our decarbonization track and our respect for nature, biodiversity, ecosystems preservation?
Yeah, thanks very much. These are not easy questions, but I think if you look at the proposal that the Commission made last week, that this is not business as usual is evident. At the same time, it is of course part of the proposal. But what you see, for example, now is that you see a large number of companies facing solvency issues, and for them, sound companies, and it's very important that we support the fabric of our economy. So when I speak about the solvency instrument that we have proposed and that we started discussing with member states representatives since yesterday, it is clear that here speed is of the essence, and that we want to roll out this support fairly quickly. We did write into the proposal references to the European Green Deal and other long-term objectives. What I would say though is that this is a program that is more directed at the immediate crisis impact on the economy. So I think that the steering that we may reach with this program in relation to Green Deal objectives may not be so strong. That's my hunch. Also, given that it's a proposal, and now we will have to see where member states come down, but the references are there in terms of the policy intent from our side. What is much more important, and I think already in good part in place, is InvestEU, where we make a new proposal based on the partial agreement by co-legislators reached in April last year. And a lot of the work on guidance documents and delegated acts, such as the investment guidelines, has already been going on. And what we are enshrining there are principles regarding sustainability proofing, do no harm principle, and climate tracking that will make sure that this program, which we have in our proposal doubled overall, that these principles are adhered to, and that the now much increased investment volume that we're expecting from there is certainly focused on programs that fulfill these requirements. So I think it's clear that we are not deviating from these priorities, in particular not with the investment program that is really at the core of our policy priorities.
Thank you very much, Markus, for indeed a very clear presentation, going through some complexity, and also a clear response right now, and highlighting, I guess, the tension between the urgency of the response that is needed and the support to member states and the long-term objectives, including the Green Deal. We'll keep discussing that in the coming hours, actually. So thanks for attending. And to all attendees, again, we see your questions coming. We'll try to respond to them during the event, but we'll also follow up on social media and put them out for the conversation to continue.